I'm Emily Carter. I'm 31 now with my own small business and a quiet life. Back then, all I wanted was to be seen, not praised, just seen. But even on my sister's wedding day, I was still the extra. They told me right at the door, "You're not family. Please leave." So I turned to go, but something stopped the ceremony. They said the wedding would be small, just family. I didn't ask for an invitation. I knew better. Still, when the envelope never came, I stared at the mailbox a little longer each day. On the morning of the wedding, I sat alone at a diner with a lukewarm coffee and a slice of dry toast. It wasn't until I opened my phone that I saw it a photo of the bridal party, my sister glowing in white, our mother beside her, and a caption from an old high school friend. Such a beautiful Carter family moment. I wasn't in it. My name wasn't even tagged. A quiet part of me had hoped, but I should have known. My mother used to say Emily's always been a little distant. She said it in front of people. I used to laugh it off. I didn't laugh that morning. Around noon, I got up, changed out of my jeans, and slipped into a navy blue dress I hadn't worn in years. The fabric felt tighter than I remembered, like it didn't quite belong on me anymore. Or maybe I didn't quite belong in it. Still, I looked in the mirror, adjusted the neckline, and put on lipstick. Something soft, not loud. I left my hair as it was neatly pulled back. I didn't want to be seen. I just wanted to be there. The venue was only 15 minutes from my apartment, a small garden just outside the city tucked behind rows of oak trees and trimmed hedges. The kind of place you'd pick if you wanted intimacy and exclusivity. I didn't check in at the front. I walked in through the side gate where the caterers had been bringing in food. No one stopped me. Rows of white chairs, strings of fairy lights, guests chatting, laughing, holding glasses of champagne already half empty. A string quartet played something slow and delicate. I spotted my mother near the front row, adjusting the hem of my sister's veil, whispering something in her ear. They both laughed. They didn't see me. Not yet. I stood near the last row. I didn't plan to take a seat. That would have been too much. Instead, I stayed by a tall potted plant, half shadowed, half exposed. Just enough to hear. Just enough to see. People passed me by without a second glance. One woman handed me her empty wine glass, mistaking me for staff. I took it without saying a word. She didn't even thank me. That moment didn't sting. Not compared to what came next. From a distance, I heard someone say, "Is that Emily?" Then another voice, familiar, sharper. She wasn't invited. She just showed up again. I didn't look to see who said it. I didn't need to. I'd heard that tone before at birthdays, at dinners, even on the night of my graduation when they left early because the drive was too far. I stayed put. The ceremony was about to begin. Guests began sitting down. I stepped a little farther back. That's when my mother turned around and saw me. There was no surprise on her face, just a tight smile, the kind people give when they step in something they weren't expecting. She leaned over to my sister and whispered. I saw both their heads turn slightly, just enough to know I was being spoken about not to. My sister didn't look at me. She adjusted her bouquet. I folded my arms across my chest and leaned slightly on the wooden fence lining the garden. The quartet stopped. Everyone turned. The officiant took his place. The hush before the ceremony felt colder than I imagined. From where I stood, I could see the groom at the altar shifting nervously. And then the processional began. As the music played and my sister began her slow walk down the aisle, everyone rose from their seats, smiling. The air felt still, like it was holding its breath. I stayed standing at the back, out of line with the rest, as if even gravity didn't want to acknowledge me in the room. She looked beautiful, I'll admit that. Hair curled, just enough veil draping softly over her shoulders, the white satin hugging her perfectly. I remembered when we were little she'd make me pretend to be the flower girl at her imaginary weddings. She'd always play the bride. I never minded. I liked watching her take the spotlight, but this time I wasn't sure why I'd come. Maybe some part of me wanted proof. Proof that I didn't exist in their world anymore, or maybe that I still did in some small, painful way. She reached the altar, took his hand, and the officiant began. The usual words, the promises, the scripted humor, laughter from the crowd, then stillness again. I felt a pair of eyes on me. I turned just slightly. It was a woman I didn't recognize sitting near the back watching me like I was a misplaced guest or a mistake in the seating chart. I smiled faintly. She looked away. Then someone approached me. He was in his mid-50s wearing a light gray suit, holding a clipboard. "I'm sorry," he said under his breath with a forced smile. "Are you with the venue staff?" I shook my head, calm. "I'm family," I said. He hesitated, then looked down at his list. "I don't see your name." "You wouldn't. I didn't offer more." He gave a tight nod and backed away. No scene, no explanation. That was fine. The vows began. My sister's voice trembled slightly. I could tell she had rehearsed this. When the groom spoke, his voice was steadier, more deliberate. I noticed how he looked at her not just as a man in love, but as someone trying to be sure, maybe even convincing himself of something. And for a moment, his eyes lifted and landed on me. He didn't flinch. He didn't smile either. He just held my gaze for a second longer than was appropriate, then back to her. No one else seemed to notice. But I did. The ceremony moved on. Rings exchanged. Applause. A brief kiss. Then the announcement, "Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you." People clapped. Some stood. Phones went up. Music resumed. I stepped back further. As the couple walked down the aisle, they passed by row after row of smiling faces. When they reached the end, I moved just slightly to the side, not enough to be in the way, but enough to be seen. He saw me again. This time, so did she. Her lips tightened. Her eyes narrowed not in anger, but in discomfort, as if my presence scratched at something she'd worked hard to cover up. I didn't speak. They walked on. The crowd followed, spilling toward the reception area under the large tent nearby. I waited. 10 minutes. Maybe 15. Then I walked in. The reception was already loud. Laughter, clinking glasses, the start of music. A table with name cards. I didn't look for mine. I headed toward the far end where servers were placing hors d'oeuvres on trays. I picked one up, nodded at the server. He nodded back, uncertain. No one stopped me. I stood near the edge of the dance floor watching as my mother took the microphone and tapped it lightly. "I just want to say," she began, voice syrupy sweet, "how proud I am of my daughter. She's always been the golden one, always so graceful, so poised. Today she's stepping into the life she deserves." I closed my eyes. That phrase, the golden one, she used it all the time. At her piano recitals, her graduations, her promotion parties. Never mine. I opened my eyes just as my mother said, "And to everyone who's supported her and us as a family, thank you. This is what family looks like." A pause. Some claps. I stayed by the wall. I could feel their words like glass shards sliding under the skin. But I didn't move. I didn't react. I just folded my arms and waited. A few guests drifted toward the buffet, balancing wine glasses and small talk. I stayed in the shadows near a support column wrapped in fairy lights. The light flickered quietly against the glass behind me. Then I heard my name. "Emily." I turned slightly. It was one of my cousins, Sophie, I think. We hadn't spoken in years. She wore a pastel pink dress and carried a plate of shrimp cocktail. "I didn't think you were invited," she said, smiling in a way that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I wasn't," I replied casually. There was a pause. She looked down at her plate, then back up. "Well, glad you came, I guess." She walked off before I could answer. I moved toward the back where the gift table was. Hundreds of dollars in carefully wrapped boxes, cards tucked into envelopes, each bearing familiar handwriting. I wondered if my name was on any of them. Probably not. But one thing caught my eye, a small white envelope tucked behind a bouquet. My name handwritten in my father's script. Except, my father had passed away 5 years ago. I didn't reach for it. Not yet. Instead, I found a seat near the edge of the tent next to an empty place setting. I sat quietly, folded my hands in my lap, and watched. People danced. The bride glowed. My mother laughed at something the groom whispered in her ear. Then a toast. It was the maid of honor, my sister's college roommate. blonde, sharp-tongued, always too interested in the family's inner workings. To the couple, she said, lifting her glass, and to a wedding that finally feels like we've trimmed the fat. Clean slate, clean guest list. Some guests chuckled. I didn't. I met her gaze across the dance floor. She held it for a moment, then broke it first. There was a moment of silence between clinks of glasses. Then I stood. I walked past the dance floor, past the buffet, past the conversations that thinned as I moved. No one said anything. At the gift table, I reached for the white envelope, slipped it into my pocket. I didn't open it, not yet. As I stepped outside, the night air wrapped around me, cool and still. Crickets hummed faintly in the distance. The tent lights spilled golden onto the grass, framing a celebration I was never meant to belong to. I looked back once. The music picked up again. No one noticed I was gone, and yet somehow I knew that was going to change. Soon. The next morning, the rehearsal brunch was held on the garden lawn behind the country estate. White umbrellas shaded the long tables, and servers in black vests moved gracefully between guests pouring mimosas and refilling coffee cups. I arrived 10 minutes early and stood at the edge of the lawn unnoticed. A breeze brushed through the hydrangeas lining the stone path, and I could hear the familiar voice of my mother already mid-story laughing with someone over a tale I probably knew by heart. A waiter passed me without pause. No. Are you looking for someone? No offer of a seat. I walked slowly toward the tables. Place cards had been set delicate ivory folds with gold lettering. No card bore my name. I stopped at the last table. Near the far end, 3 empty chairs sat together. No cards, just linen napkins and untouched silverware. I sat in one of them. No one looked up. For a while I listened. Toasts floated through the air. My uncle stood glass-raised, praising my sister for finding someone who truly fits into the family. My mother clapped too quickly. My name was never mentioned. The groom hadn't arrived yet. And somehow I wasn't surprised. Eventually the maid of honor made her way down the line of tables. She stopped when she reached me. "Oh," she said, as if discovering a smudge on her dress. "That seat's for press. The photographer's assistant." I didn't move. "I'll only be a few minutes," I said. Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing more. Later my sister walked in, lace sundress, oversized sunglasses, a practiced smile. She gave hugs, made rounds, accepted compliments. But when she reached my table, she barely paused. "Oh, you came," she said, like it had slipped her mind. I looked up at her. "Good morning." She nodded once, then turned away. I watched her walk toward our mother, linking arms like old friends the way we used to when we were kids. There was no glance back, no flicker of hesitation. As the brunch wore on, I stayed quiet. I smiled when spoken to, responded when required, but otherwise, I simply watched. The stories people told were warm and glittery, thick with family memories, except none included me. It was as if I had been edited out like a face removed from an old photo. Then came the gift opening. One by one, my sister unwrapped Presents monogrammed towels, designer cookware, handwritten letters full of praise. When she picked up a flat, silver-wrapped box, her expression changed slightly. From Mom and Dad, she read aloud, then looked around. Though, technically, just Mom now. My stomach tightened. She opened it, a delicate pearl necklace. The same one I remembered admiring as a child. I thought that was meant for a guest, began, but stopped. My mother cleared her throat. "We always said it would go to the first daughter to marry." The words stung more than I expected. I didn't speak, but I felt the envelope in my pocket still unopened. That evening there was a final walkthrough at the chapel. I wasn't technically part of the bridal party, but my name had been on the group text, probably out of habit, so I went. The chapel was already glowing with soft candlelight, and strings of pale white roses coiled around the wooden pews. Everyone else had gathered near the altar, where the wedding coordinator gave instructions like a schoolteacher before a play. I stayed near the back. No one noticed. Bridesmaids line up on the left, groomsmen right. Parents, you'll be seated after the guests. My name wasn't called. Eventually the coordinator looked around. "And who's Emily Carter?" I raised my hand. "Oh," she said, flipping a page on her clipboard. "You're not listed. Sorry, you might want to check with the family." No one turned, not my mother, not my sister, not even the maid of honor who had been a family friend since we were in elementary school. I stepped back quietly and sat on one of the side benches watching everyone rehearse their parts. My sister looked radiant, of course. She always had a way of catching light. The groom stood beside her, calm, steady eyes only on her. I watched as my mother handed off a small velvet box to the best man, most likely the ring box. She didn't even glance toward me. 15 minutes passed, then 30. When the run-through ended, people chatted in clusters. Someone brought out sparkling water. Laughter echoed off the chapel walls. I walked outside. The sun was dipping behind the trees, casting long shadows across the gravel path. I found a bench near the small fountain in front of the chapel and sat watching the water ripple. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps behind me. "You left early," a voice said. I turned. It was the groom. "I wasn't really needed inside," I replied, keeping my voice even. He sat beside me, not too close. "You've been quiet this whole weekend," he said. I smiled faintly. "There's not much for me to say." He looked at me then like he really saw me, not as someone's sister, just me. "I asked if you were coming. Your sister said maybe." "I'm glad you did." I nodded. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded paper. "It's the speech I wrote," he said. "I didn't show it to anyone yet. I don't like surprises, but I think this one, maybe it's worth it." I didn't reach for it. He tucked it back into his coat. "I'll see you tomorrow, Emily," he said softly before standing and walking away. The next morning I came downstairs to find a small note by the coffee pot. "Emily, please don't cause any awkwardness today. This is her moment. Let's keep things smooth." "Mom." I read it twice, folded it carefully and placed it back where I found it. At the venue I arrived early again, slipping into the ceremony hall through a side entrance. The seats were already being arranged, florists still adjusting petals on the arch. Someone mistook me for event staff and handed me a clipboard. I handed it back wordlessly. Guests began arriving by noon. I took a seat in the very last row. People filed in, filling the room with whispers and perfume and polished shoes clicking on marble floors. I watched as ushers guided family members to the front, our uncles, cousins, even neighbors from childhood. My name wasn't called. When the officiant began, the room hushed. Everyone rose as my sister entered on our mother's arm veil trailing like fog behind her. She looked ahead. Not once did her gaze sweep the rows to where I sat, but I didn't expect it to. The ceremony passed like a soft blur, each word drifting through the hall like incense, beautiful but distant. I watched it all, the vows, the exchange of rings, the applause, the kiss. No one looked back. I didn't expect them to. At the reception, I entered through the side again. The ballroom was grand with golden chandeliers casting soft light over round tables draped in ivory. I found an unmarked seat near the edge of the room. No name tag, just a folded napkin and silverware that hadn't been touched. As guests arrived, they made their way to the designated tables. Some looked at me surprised to see I was here. A few smiled politely, but most averted their gaze. I stayed seated, sipping water, watching the room fill. When the DJ called for the bridal party to be introduced, the crowd clapped and whooped. Names echoed through the speakers, the groomsmen, the bridesmaids, the newlyweds. One by one they entered through a curtain of fairy lights, waving and laughing. I clapped too softly. Dinner was served. Waitstaff began delivering plates to the table's salmon steak vegetarian options. My table was last, and when they reached me, the tray was empty. The server looked confused. "I'm sorry. I think this seat wasn't on the list." I nodded. "It's okay." He hesitated, then said, "I'll check with the kitchen." I watched him disappear behind a set of swinging doors. 10 minutes passed. 15. No one noticed. I wasn't really hungry anyway. The speeches began. My mother stood first, glass in hand. Her voice was warm, glowing. To my daughter she said, eyes sparkling, "You've always been the light of this family, the one who brought us pride, the one who never disappointed." The crowd murmured in agreement, raising their glasses. I didn't move. Later, the maid of honor told a story about a childhood trip describing how my sister held the group together during a snowstorm. She didn't mention I had been the one to plan the trip. I remembered that storm. I remembered giving up my sleeping bag that night so my sister wouldn't get sick. But stories change over time. The final straw came when the DJ announced a family photo on the dance floor. Just siblings and parents, he said cheerfully. I stayed seated, assuming they wouldn't expect me. But then I saw my mother look over scanning. Her eyes landed on me. She turned away. My sister walked past me, adjusting her dress. "You might want to stay out of this one," she whispered. "It's already crowded up front." I didn't answer. I just adjusted my chair slightly so it faced the wall of windows. Flashes flickered behind me, 1, 2, 3. Then the music picked up again. The crowd returned to dancing. I sat still. Eventually, someone tapped my shoulder. A guest mid-40s holding a cocktail. "You're Emily, right?" she asked. "Sister of the bride." I nodded. She hesitated. "I always thought there were 2 Carter girls, but I never see you in the photos." I smiled. "That's by design." The woman gave me a look I couldn't quite read. Then she patted my shoulder awkwardly and walked away. I turned back toward the window, catching my reflection in the glass. I looked calm, distant, like someone who had long made peace with being in the background. But even then I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. The cake had been cut. The couple had danced their first dance. Laughter filled the air, rich and easy, like nothing had ever gone wrong in this family. I sat near the exit now, the hum of the celebration behind me like a radio tuned just slightly off. I was almost invisible even here. Almost. Then I saw him, Noah, the groom. He was standing at the edge of the dance floor watching his bride twirl with their father. His jaw was tight, his eyes not entirely on her. When she laughed, he didn't. Our eyes met for just a second, and he began walking through the couples, the waiters, the clinking glasses straight toward me. I straightened my back without meaning to. "Emily," he said quietly, "can we talk for a second?" I glanced around. A few heads turned. Not many, but enough to make me hesitate. He extended his hand, palm open. My sister noticed. Her face fell like something delicate had cracked along the edge. Noah didn't look back. He just waited. I placed my hand in his. He helped me to my feet and in a calm, steady motion led me to the center of the room. The music didn't stop, but the conversations did. People turned. He cleared his throat. "Before anything else continues tonight, I want to acknowledge someone who's been overlooked. Not by me, but by others." Silence rippled outward like a dropped glass in water. She showed up today despite being told not to. She stayed even when made to feel unwelcome, and she has done so with more grace than most could ever manage. I didn't speak. I didn't smile. I just stood still, letting his words move through the room like quiet thunder. "She's my sister now too," he said, "and I'm proud of that." He squeezed my hand once lightly before letting go. I didn't look around, but I could feel the shift shoulders tensed, wine glasses paused mid-air, the faint creak of chairs turning ever so slightly toward me. Then from somewhere near the front, my mother's voice. This is not the time. Noah cut her off without raising his voice. It's exactly the time. Another ripple, then nothing. My sister stood frozen at the edge of the dance floor, bouquet in one hand, her expression unreadable. For once she didn't know what to say, and that was enough. I nodded gently to Noah. "Thank you," I said softly, just enough for him to hear. Then I turned one step, then another, walking slowly back to my table. I didn't rush, I didn't hide. Behind me the music resumed, but the laughter didn't. Something had shifted, something had ended, and something else had quietly begun. I sat down again, but it wasn't the same. The seat felt warmer somehow, like the eyes in the room had imprinted heat into the cushion. People didn't turn away fast enough this time when I caught their glance. A few even held it for a beat too long, as if reconsidering everything they thought they knew about me. A woman I vaguely recognized from my sister's circle, tall, poised, always polished, walked by and paused. Her voice dropped low enough to not make a scene, but just enough to leave a dent. "You handled that with grace," she said, then walked off before I could respond. I stared at my untouched glass of water. This was new. This attention. This sudden awareness. And I wasn't sure if I liked it. The photographer hovered nearby, unsure whether to shoot or avoid me altogether. Eventually he stepped back, turned to someone else, and lifted the camera again. I caught his hesitation, though. Then came the speeches. Toasts from friends, relatives, the best man, all full of joy and predictable nostalgia. I half-listened, fingers tracing the stem of the glass, and then my name again. "I want to say something," Noah said. The mic was passed to him once more. I didn't look up this time, but I heard it. "Emily taught me something," he began. "Sometimes the people who stay quiet the longest are the ones who carry the most." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. She showed up today knowing she might be turned away. She stayed knowing no one might thank her. She stood not because she wanted attention, but because silence should not always mean absence. I looked up. His eyes were fixed on mine. "And I hope," he continued, "that everyone here reflects on that, even just for a moment." There was no applause, just a heavy stillness, followed by the soft clink of someone lowering their fork. I saw my sister whisper something to our mother. Her lips were tight. My mother shook her head slightly. I imagined the conversation. "She's making this about herself." "No, she isn't. She hasn't said a word." That was the part they struggled with, the quiet. Not loud accusations, not a dramatic exit, but stillness. The kind that said, "I'm here, and I see everything." Later, as people began to move around again, some faces softened when they passed me. One older cousin who hadn't spoken to me in years gave a half-smile and touched my shoulder in passing. No words, just recognition. Even that was new. Even that felt loud. I stepped outside for a moment. The air was cool now, evening settling in. Lights glowed from the reception hall behind me, golden and soft. Inside, people danced again, trying to return to rhythm. I leaned on the stone railing, watching the sky. Behind me, the door opened. Noah. He didn't speak right away. Then, "I never liked the way they talked about you." I didn't answer. "I saw the way you looked at her when she said you weren't family, and how you stayed anyway." He shifted slightly beside me. "I'm sorry." I let the silence stretch. "Then, you didn't say it, but I didn't stop it either." I nodded. That was fair. He didn't defend me back then. But today he had chosen differently, and sometimes that mattered more. He looked out toward the lawn. "She's not happy. You know that, right?" "That's not my concern anymore," I said, and surprised myself with how even it came out. He chuckled quietly. "You're stronger than she thinks. I'm stronger than I thought." His gaze turned toward me again, but I kept looking at the stars just beginning to appear. Neither of us said more. We didn't need to. I eventually returned inside, not because I wanted to, but because I didn't want them thinking I'd left without saying goodbye. The room had shifted again. It wasn't just me now, people saw it too. Some avoided my eyes, unsure what they were supposed to do with the new version of me. Others met my gaze and didn't look away. A kind of quiet acknowledgement settled over the space, as if, without a word, the room had collectively agreed something had changed. Dinner was nearly done. The dessert trays had been cleared. The DJ announced the couple's final dance of the night. Guests gathered in a circle around my sister and Noah as they stepped into the middle. The lights dimmed. A soft melody played. I stood at the edge of the room, watching from the back, not hidden, not exiled, but by choice this time. Noah glanced in my direction just once. It wasn't a long look, but it lingered enough. My sister noticed. I could tell by the way her smile faltered, not enough for most people to catch, but I saw it. She leaned in, whispered something to him. He didn't respond. The dance ended. Polite applause, a few cheers, champagne glasses raised. Then the real finale began. Goodbyes. People began trickling out, hugging, grabbing coats, saying, "Let's meet soon and we'll text." I waited. I didn't want to rush the moment. I didn't want my leaving to be seen as defeat. Eventually, I walked toward the front where my sisters stood with our parents accepting congratulations like a queen who had just secured her kingdom. She turned as I approached. For a moment, I saw a flicker uncertainty maybe, or guilt, or both. "Emily," she said carefully, "thanks for coming." I paused a foot away. "You're welcome?" I replied. I wasn't sure I should. Her smile froze. "You know," I continued, voice calm, "I almost left when you said I wasn't family." Her eyes darted, scanning the small crowd still nearby. "But I didn't," I said softer now, "because I knew who I was, even if no one else did." There was no anger in my tone, no edge, just truth. I looked at my mother then. She looked away. At my father, he held his glass a little tighter. I gave them both a small, polite nod. Not asking for anything, not expecting it. Then I turned to leave. No dramatic exit. No tearful finale. Just the sound of my heels on the wooden floor, steady and sure. At the door, the event coordinator offered to call my ride. I declined. Outside, the night had fully settled. The wind picked up slightly, brushing my hair back as I stood by the curb. Then behind me, the door opened again. I didn't turn. But I heard the steps. Emily Noah's voice said behind me, "Wait." I didn't move. He came to stand beside me. Not too close, not demanding. "You didn't have to stay," he said. "But I'm glad you did." I looked at him finally. He held out his hand. Not a grand gesture, not romantic, just acknowledgement. I took it. For a moment. Then let go. "I wasn't here for you," I said. "I know," he replied. "But still." We stood there silent until a car pulled up. I opened the door, slid inside, and gave him one final look. He wasn't smiling, but he looked like he understood. I closed the door gently. As we pulled away, I didn't look back. Inside that hall, music would start again. Laughter would resume. They'd reset, try to forget. But I wouldn't. Because this time they were the ones who had to sit with the silence. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't demand to be seen. She simply stayed. And that was enough. Not every victory is loud. Sometimes the most powerful moment is when you choose to stand still and let the silence speak for you.